You were not part of Mr. Depp's family, right?
Correct.
You're not with him 24/7, right?
Correct.
And you weren't with him 24/7 when he was in a relationship with Miss Heard, correct?
Correct.
And you obviously have no personal knowledge of what happens when you're not around, correct?
That's correct.
And you have no personal knowledge of what happens behind closed doors with Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
You weren't, when Mr. Depp was in a relationship with Miss Heard, you weren't traveling out of Los Angeles as part of Mr. Depp's security, correct?
I did on one occasion.
What occasion was that?
We did a trip to Austin, Texas.
But other than that, you didn't travel outside of LA as part of your security when he was with Miss Heard, correct?
Correct.
So you weren't in Australia in March of 2015, right?
Correct.
You weren't on a plane flight from Boston to Los Angeles in May of 2014, correct?
Correct.
You didn't go to the Bahamas with him, correct?
Correct.
You didn't go to Tokyo with him and Miss Heard, correct?
Correct.
You're around him almost every day when he's in Los Angeles, right?
Almost.
Picking up food for him,
Yes.
pick up medicine for him,
Yes.
help coordinate visitors to his house
Correct.
or his houses, pick up groceries for him,
Yes.
and you let him into places like his residences, right?
Correct.
Because he doesn't carry keys for them, right?
Correct.
You drive him places,
I do.
right? Almost every time he leaves his property, he's being driven rather than driving, correct?
Almost every time.
And you help arrange that, right?
Yes.
Your responsibility, one of them, is to help get him where he needs to go, right?
Yes.
You've woken him up in the mornings before?
I have.
And yesterday, I believe you testified that sometimes Mr. Depp would have just a glass of wine or two, right?
Yes.
And you testified that his demeanor when he was slightly intoxicated was the same as if he had had a glass of sparkling water. You remember giving that testimony?
I do.
Fact is, you've seen him much more impaired than that, right?
I have.
You've seen him impaired enough that you've had to help put him to bed before, right?
I don't understand by putting him to bed.
Well, there have been times when Mr. Depp was so impaired that you had to get up the stairs and open the bedroom doors for him, right?
Well, that specific bedroom door in his Los Angeles house, it has a tricky lock to it. So it's, there have been times where I've gone upstairs and maybe had a glass of water for him. And so I would have to open that door for him, correct?
Right, so you've gotten him into bed, you've gotten him some water, you've asked him if he needs anything, right?
Correct.
In times when he's been impaired, correct?
And times when he's just had breakfast and some coffee.
And you've stayed with him, and during times when he's been impaired, there's times when you've stayed with him until he lays down and you tell him goodnight and that you'll see him the next day, right?
I wouldn't stay with him. I just would say goodnight, I'm going home, and I'll see you tomorrow. Or if I happen to have a few days off, I'll see you in a few days.
Now, yesterday, you've actually prevented people from calling the police when Mr. Depp's behavior after drinking was bothering them, haven't you?
Prevented people?
Mm-hmm.
There was one time, correct?
Yeah, and in that occasion, Mr. Depp and some other people had a couple perfect bottles of wine and pounded an entire bottle of tequila, right?
I don't remember how much they had to drink, no. I know there was drinking going on.
Mr. Depp told you that they had a couple bottles of perfect wine and pounded an entire bottle of tequila, right?
I don't remember. That was some time ago.
Heather, can you pull up Exhibit 892, please? Mr. Bett, is this a text exchange that you had with Mr. Depp on September 1st, 2017, or 2:34 to 2:36 in the afternoon?
If you just give me a moment, let me put my glasses on.
Sure, take your time.
I have a hard time. Thank you. Okay, much better. Can you repeat that statement or question?
Sure. My question was just, is this a text exchange that you and Mr. Depp had on September 1st, 2017, from 2:34 to 2:36 in the afternoon?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. The date. This is well after What's the relevance of 2017?
The relevance is that Mr. Bett testified yesterday that he'd seen Mr. Depp have a glass or two of wine, and this is direct evidence to contradict that.
All right, I'll allow it. All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Since there was no time frame on that. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, according to the timestamp and date, that is a text message from Mr. Depp and I.
And at 2:34 p.m., Mr. Depp texts you, steaks were excellent, pondering, though we'll likely have dinner here. Steaks were excellent, a couple of bottles of perfect wine. We then pounded an entire bottle of tequila, 3 exclamation points. Then the savagery commenced, 2 exclamation points. Good morning, 3 exclamation points. Did I read that right?
You did. And there's an X and facha after that.
Okay. And then you told Mr. Depp that you said, I prevented them from calling Popo.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
All right. Here's
Also improper impeachment.
That's for the context of the text. And when he testified that he had prevented him from calling the police.
I'll allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor. So then, Mr. Bett, you texted Mr. Depp back 2 minutes later, and you said, I prevented them from calling Popo. Glad you had fun. You mean dinner in room or restaurant? Do you see that?
I do.
And you sent that text to Mr. Depp, correct?
I did.
And by Popo, you mean police, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You told him that you were glad he had fun, right?
Right.
Your Honor, permission, move for admission of Exhibit 892 and permission to publish.
Our objection is relevance. This is well past the relationship between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard.
Okay. If it was just used for impeachment, why would it come into evidence?
Well, it's Mr. Depp's statements about what he did when he pounded an entire bottle of tequila and the savagery that commenced go toward his use of alcohol. That's much greater than...
In 2017?
Mm-hmm.
I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're aware that Mr. Depp has used drugs, right?
I am.
And you've helped facilitate Mr. Depp's drug use on occasion, correct?
I haven't.
I'm sorry?
I haven't.
You have not?
I have not.
Heather, can you pull up Exhibit 967, please? Mr. Bett, feel free to take the time that you need to review this document, familiarize yourself with it. But my first question for you is just, is this a text exchange that you had with Mr. Depp on June 12th, 2019?
June 12th. According to these transcripts, yeah, it has my name and his name on there.
Right. And if it starts at the bottom and goes up, correct?
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention to the timestamps.
That's okay.
My
It's
apologies.
hard to orient yourself with these sometimes.
Okay, at the bottom, yeah, I do see 6/12/19 at 1:50 p.m.
And then the more recent texts are as you go up the page, right?
Correct.
So in the bottom text, you're telling Mr. Depp that some people are at his house visiting, and you say they'll be at the pool in 10,
Objection, Your
right?
Honor. Hearsay. Also relevance. This is 2019.
What's the relevance?
He just testified that he hadn't helped facilitate Mr. Depp's drug use, so this is for impeachment, and this is, you got to read the text in context to see how it impeaches him.
All right, we could come.
Sure.
We could approach, please.
Mr. Bett, you communicate with Mr. Depp through texts, correct?
I do.
That's your primary way of communicating with him?
Well, not primary. I mean, if I happen to be in his presence, we'll communicate.
Sure, but in terms of written communications, texting is the way that you guys primarily communicate, right?
Correct.
And that's the same thing the same way that you communicate primarily with his other employees or with his family as well, right?
Yes.
You have a practice of deleting all of your texts with him at the end of the day or week, correct?
That's correct.
So there wouldn't be text from his time when he was in a relationship with Amber Heard that you have possession of, correct?
That's correct.
You've never seen Amber do something that you would call physically violent or an assault of Mr. Depp, correct?
Other than when I testified that she threw a water bottle or a plastic cup in his direction.
But that, you wouldn't consider that physically violent or an assault of him, correct?
Well, in California, it's assault if you go to attempt to swing or throw something at somebody, even if you don't hit them.
You all right? Okay, just standing. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Mr. Bett, do you remember giving a deposition in this case?
I do.
And you were under oath for that deposition, correct?
I was.
And I asked you a number of questions, right?
You asked me several, yes.
I did. And if you can turn to page 111 of this transcript, please. It's on page 28 of the
I
document.
know. I'm sorry. Okay.
And if you look at line 22, the last line, and then heading over to page 112, you see that?
Got it.
And in your deposition, I asked you this question, and you gave this answer. Question: so is it fair to say that while you've seen Miss Heard yell and get emotional toward Johnny, you've never seen her do something that you would call physically violent or assault of Johnny? Answer: correct. Did I read that right?
You did.
I'd like to turn to May 21st, 2016. That was the incident that we talked about last night, right before we adjourned for the day, correct?
Correct.
You and Mr. Jerry Judge brought Mr. Depp over to the penthouses at the Eastern Columbia building that night, right?
We did.
And you knew that he was going there to speak with Amber, correct?
And gather some belongings.
Your understanding was that Mr. Depp was going over there because they both wanted to talk and calm everything down, right?
Objection calls for speculation as to what Ms. Heard wanted.
I'll sustain the objection if you want to rephrase.
Mr. Depp told you that he and Amber were going to talk it out and talk about what's going on, correct?
Correct.
And he had wine in the car on the way over. I believe you testified yesterday, right?
He did have a glass of wine.
And I think you testified it's possible he had been drinking during the day before you brought him over there, correct?
Correct. I saw him with a wine glass after his meeting when he came out into the hallway.
And when you, no, I'm sorry, during the day before you picked him up to go over to the Eastern Columbia building, it's possible he had been drinking, correct?
Well, we were at a meeting. He did have a glass of wine in his hand, so I presume he was drinking.
Okay. And when you arrived at the Eastern Columbia building, you can't say one way or the other whether Mr. Depp was carrying wine with him into the building, right?
I can't remember.
You and Mr. Judge led him into Penthouse 3 and were in there for just a minute or two before you exited Penthouse 3, correct?
Yes, give or take.
And then you stayed outside in the hallway of Penthouse 3 for a bit, right?
A short period of time, correct.
I think you testified yesterday like 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, give or take.
And then from there, you went from the hallway outside of Penthouse 3 to Penthouse 5, the storage area where you had a couch and a TV and that sort of thing that you testified about, right?
That's correct.
Is that also known as the guard shack?
A modified version of the guard shack. It's just a place for us, as I testified yesterday, to rest or have lunch or some coffee.
Sometimes called the cubby hole, is that right?
We might have called that, I can't remember what.
Okay, just to orient us, Heather, can you please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 116? And Your Honor, I believe this has already been entered into evidence.
I do believe so. Yes, it's in evidence. So you
Can you rotate that, please? Counterclockwise. Okay, and then maybe just blow it up, please. And Your Honor, permission to publish if it's
It is
not already.
published.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Bett, if you, just to orient us, am I correct in saying that well, could you put your finger just on the guard shack area of Penthouse 5, please?
Sure,
if you
it's
touch the
just
screen, it will-
the diagram, the schematics is kind of off because the way Broadway is set up, it doesn't coincide with the way the buildings were. But I can make an attempt to show you where the,
Yeah, just, I think the screen will make a mark if you show on it.
okay. I mean, I'm having a,
Well, I'm not
okay,
seeing any
okay,
marks. Okay, good.
so this is, I'd say right in this area right here.
Okay,
Is it showing up?
Yes.
Because there would be elevators to the right.
it is.
Okay,
Yep, that's showing up.
okay,
So that's down the hall from outside of Penthouse 3, right?
correct.
And you stayed in that guard shack for, I believe you said 5 to 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yes,
So if you spent about 10 minutes outside Penthouse 3 and then 5 to 10 minutes inside the guard shack, you say you were at the building for what, a total of 30 minutes or so?
it could have been a little bit longer. It could have been 40. It could have been closer to an hour. It was quite some time ago.
But you're fairly confident it was 40 minutes to an hour?
Around that time frame, correct.
And you said that you arrived at the building sometime between 7:15 and 7:45. Is that what you said yesterday?
Yeah.
What's your
around-
best guess?
It would be an estimate guess, maybe more towards 8-ish, but again, it could have been 7:30. I just,
Okay, more towards 8-ish. All right. And so you stayed in the guard shack for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you left the guard shack and headed back up the hall toward the door of Penthouse 3, right?
yes,
And at some point, you heard Amber shouting, and you let yourself into Penthouse 3, right?
that's correct.
The closest you got to Amber when you went into Penthouse 3 was 15 to 20 feet, right?
Around that, correct.
And you were in Penthouse 3 for just about 30 seconds to a minute before you left again with Mr. Depp, right?
Around that time frame.
You don't remember what Miss Heard was wearing, do you?
I don't.
And you can't remember if she was crying when you saw her, right?
I didn't see her crying.
You can't remember if she was crying, right?
I just said I didn't see her crying.
She could have been crying, right?
Objection calls for speculation and asked and answered.
It's a different question.
Well, I'll sustain that objection. The next question.
And you can't remember if she had any makeup on or not, right?
If she did, she had very little.
You just can't remember if she did, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it was a long time ago.
Turn to page 160, please, in your deposition.
Okay, that'd be page 40
Page
as well.
Page 40, yes,
Okay.
yes, sir. And on line 1, I asked you the question, did Ms. Heard have any, you couldn't tell if she was wearing any makeup, right? Your answer was, I can't remember if she had any makeup on or not. Did I read that right?
You did.
And you don't know what, you have no personal knowledge of what transpired in Penthouse 3 while you were outside of it that evening, correct?
I don't.
And you have no personal knowledge of whether Amber had a phone thrown in her face by Johnny Depp that evening, correct?
I don't.
Because you weren't there, right?
That's correct.
So you left Penthouse 3, and then you went into Penthouse 5 at Mr. Depp's insistence that he get into Penthouse 5, right?
That's correct.
And he was agitated at this time, right?
I'm sorry. You said I went into Penthouse 3 or Penthouse 5 at this time?
I'm sorry. You left Penthouse 3 after 30 to 60 seconds with Mr. Depp and Mr. Judge, and you went to Penthouse 5, right?
Correct.
And that's because Mr. Depp was demanding to get into Penthouse 5, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Depp was agitated at this time, right?
Yeah, I'd say he was agitated.
And one of the reasons that you could tell that he was agitated was because this wasn't the first time you had seen him agitated, right?
Well, no.
Mr. Depp told you to let him into Penthouse 5, and you did that, right?
Yes.
And when he left Penthouse 3 to go to Penthouse 5, you can't remember if he had wine in his hand or not, correct?
I can't.
I'm sorry?
I can't.
Cannot?
Cannot.
And when he walked into Penthouse 5, inside were Rocky Pennington, her fiance Josh Drew, and another woman and a dog, right?
That's correct.
And Mr. Depp told them to get out of his penthouse, right?
Yes.
And they exited, right?
They did.
And you can't remember one way or the other whether Mr. Depp knocked anything off the table in any of the penthouses, right?
It's possible he did, but I can't remember.
Did you or Mr. Judge, just to be clear, did you or Mr. Judge destroy any property or knock anything off tables in any of the penthouses that evening?
No.
You have no personal knowledge of whether or not Mr. Depp was violent to Ms. Heard at times when you weren't around them, correct?
I have no knowledge.
And Ms. Heard may have suffered injuries at the hands of Mr. Depp over the years that you didn't witness or you didn't see, correct?
Correct.
I'd like to end by just taking a look at the videos of you entering and exiting the building, I believe. Heather, could you pull up Exhibit 672? And Your Honor, I believe that these were part of Mr. Patterson's deposition and that they've been admitted.
I do have 672 admitted, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. It can
And the
be
next one will
published.
be 666, just to
Okay.
confirm.
All right, we have that as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. Heather, could you play this starting at 1? Well, actually, before we start, do you see this on your screen, Mr. Bett?
I do.
And you see the timestamp that at the bottom? That shows what time the camera, the video was taken, correct?
I see the timestamp and the date.
Okay, let's go ahead and play this, Heather. Start at 1:55. And that's you in that black and white shirt, right?
Oh, that's me.
That's Mr. Depp in the hat,
Correct.
and that's Mr. Judge to his left.
Correct.
And this video is when you're entering the Eastern Columbia building to take him to Penthouse 3, correct?
Correct.
So it's actually a good bit earlier than you testified to, right? It's at 7:02, if I'm converting military time to...
Well, that's what the timestamp says. I mean, I don't know how it was calibrated and so forth, but according to the screen, it does say 1902 hours, which is 7:02.
7:02 p.m., right?
Correct.
On May 21st, 2016,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Heather, you can take that down, please. And please pull up Exhibit 666. And you see that the timestamp on this video is, well, let's go ahead and play the video first. And that's you on the right again, right?
It is.
And that's Mr. Judge in the middle, right?
Yes.
And that's Mr. Depp on the left,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And the timestamp on this video is 20:29 or 8:29 p.m., right?
That's correct.
So you were actually in the Eastern Columbia building for about an hour and a half that evening, right?
Well, according to these timestamps, yes, it does say that. It didn't seem like it was that long.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
redirect.
Mr. Bett, you previously testified that when you left penthouse 3 and went into penthouse 5, who was inside that penthouse when you entered with Mr. Depp?
Josh Drew, an unknown female, and a little dog.
Okay. Was Ms. Pennington inside penthouse 3 when you entered with Mr. Depp?
I'm sorry, you said penthouse 5, didn't you? Am I getting my numbers?
You're right. My apologies. Let
I'm
me start
sorry.
over. It's confusing. When you left penthouse 3 and went into penthouse 5, who was inside? Let's try this again.
Okay. Josh Drew, an unknown female, and cute little dog.
Where was Ms. Pennington? Was she inside penthouse 3 when you entered? Or penthouse 5 when you entered?
She was not in penthouse 5, no.
Where was the last place you saw Ms. Pennington on May 21st?
She was standing next to Miss Hurd in penthouse number 3.
I think there's been also a little bit of confusion about April 21st, 2016 and May 21st, 2016. So let's start with April 21st, 2016. What occurred?
Objection just to the Ms. Vasquez testifying.
I'm just trying to orient the witness,
All
Your
right, well,
Honor.
go ahead.
I'll try to
Thank you.
limit that. Where was Mr. Depp on April 21st, 2016?
On April 21st, he was at a meeting in his production office.
Okay. And I believe you testified previously that you saw him holding a glass of wine. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Did he appear intoxicated to you after that meeting?
He didn't.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
He did not.
He did not, okay. Now, on May 21st, 2016, was Mr. Depp drinking wine that day?
He did have wine with him, yes, correct.
And at what point did you observe Mr. Depp with wine on May 21st, 2016?
He probably had it in the car with him when we were driving down. And he could have finished it prior to us walking to penthouse 3.
And did Mr. Depp, based on your observations, Mr. Bett, appear intoxicated to you on May 21st, 2016, before he arrived to the Eastern Columbia building?
He didn't.
He did not.
He did not.
Did you ever observe anything that made you concerned for Ms. Hurd's safety?
Objection, foundation, and leading.
I'll allow it if you can answer it. That's fine.
I did not.
What, if anything, did you observe that made you concerned for Mr. Depp's safety?
From the injuries I saw on his face when, on a few occasions, I took photos of him.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank
All
you,
right.
Your Honor.
Is this witness subject to recall?
No, Your Honor.
All right, not subject to recall, correct? Okay, all right, so you're free to go, or you can have a seat in the courtroom. It's up to you, all right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a good day, sir. All right, your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Keenan Wyatt.
Keenan Wyatt. Could you spell that name for me?
Keenan, last name Wyatt, W-Y-A-T-T.
All right, thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you, Your Honor.
Mr. Wyatt.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case and the penalty of law?
Wyatt,
Morning.
would you please state your full name for the record?
Keenan Wyatt,
Mr. Wyatt, where do you live?
Thousand Oaks, California.
What do you do for a living?
Excuse me. I'm a sound technician on feature films.
How long have you been a sound technician on feature films?
Over 35 years.
Would you please briefly describe for the jury what a sound technician on films does?
Well, technically just do the dialogue recording while on the set, so it's as clean as possible.
Do you know Johnny Depp?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Mr. Depp?
I've known Johnny for over 25 years, and we're good friends.
Have you ever worked with Mr. Depp?
Yes, I have.
For how many of Mr. Depp's films have you worked with him as the sound technician?
Dozens of films.
Would you please just name a few of them for the jury if you can remember?
I've done the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Alice in Wonderland, Rum Diary, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Ninth Gate, Lone Ranger, a number of films.
What part did Mr. Depp play in the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies?
Captain Jack Sparrow.
Are you, Mr. Wyatt, are you currently employed by Mr. Depp?
No,
Have you ever been employed by Mr. Depp?
no,
Have you ever been paid by Mr. Depp?
no.
Have you ever worked for any of Mr. Depp's companies?
Yes, I worked for Infinitum Nile.
When was the last time you worked for Infinitum Nile?
Last time I was there was probably 2017. I worked on a contract basis with them, not as an employee.
And would you very briefly describe for the jury what work you did for Infinitum Nile in 2017?
I ran the media library with them, did some archiving, recording, editing, things like that.
How would you describe briefly your working relationship with Mr. Depp in the 25 years or so that you've worked together?
Johnny's great to work with on films. He always comes very prepared and knows what he wants to do and makes it for a fun day when we're shooting.
With what directors have you and Mr. Depp worked together?
Oh, many directors. But we've done several films, multiple films with multiple directors, like Tim Burton, Gore Verbinski, Rob Marshall. We've done multiple films with them.
Why did you and Mr. Depp work with those directors more than once?
Johnny makes it easy to work with.
Foundation.
Your Honor, he's laid the foundation. He's worked with Mr. Depp for 25 years on more than 10 feature films.
And relevance.
No, I'll allow it. Good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Why did you and Mr. Depp work with those directors more than once?
Well, the directors like working for him. He comes
Objection,
with.
hearsay, move to strike.
Your Honor, you just allowed the question.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Johnny makes it easy to work with. He comes prepared. He knows what he wants to do with the characters, and he collaborates very well with the directors.
Is Pirates 5 one of the feature films on which you worked together with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Was Mr. Depp ever late to the set on Pirates 5?
Yes.
Do you know why Mr. Depp was late on those occasions?
Well, arguing going on between him and Amber.
Objection, hearsay,
I'll
foundation.
sustain the objection.
Strike that. Did you communicate with crew members on the set of Pirates 5?
Every day, yes.
Was Mr. Depp's lateness a problem for the crew?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain as to what the crew may have told him.
Well, I was just asking the threshold question of whether he had spoken with the crew.
You're right. I'll sustain the objection.
Putting aside occasional lateness on the set of Pirates 5, was production of Pirates 5 ever suspended for any period of time?
Objection, calls for hearsay, foundation. How would he know that?
No, if you can ask how he knew it, you want to lay the foundation. That's right.
How did you know whether production of Pirates 5 was ever suspended?
I was on the film. I was working on the film, so
Okay.
I know it was suspended probably for 2 or 3 weeks.
And why was it suspended for 2 or 3 weeks?
Johnny had to go back to Los Angeles because his finger had been cut off. Tip of his finger had been cut off.
Do you have any understanding of how the top of Mr. Depp's finger was cut off?
All right.
No, I don't know.
Okay. I'll return.
And I believe you testified that production was suspended for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. Did there come a time when Mr. Depp returned from Los Angeles to Australia for completion of the shooting of Pirates 5?
Yes, he did.
Who is Sean Bailey?
He's an executive at Disney.
After Mr. Depp returned to the set of Pirates 5 in Australia, what, if any, interactions did you observe between Mr. Depp and Mr. Daly?
Sean had come to set one day and sat and talked with Johnny for a while, and they talked about collaborating and doing some stuff in the future.
Was it a friendly conversation?
Absolutely, yes.
Has Mr. Depp ever worn an earpiece in any of the many movies in which you've worked with him?
Yes.
For what purpose are earpieces generally used by actors on sets?
Well, I've worked
Objection,
with.
Your Honor. First of all, relevance, foundation,
What's the relevance?
hearsay.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay, sure.
Mr. Wyatt, has Mr. Depp ever worn an earpiece in any of the movies in which you've worked with him?
Objection leading?
I'll allow it.
And he already answered it anyway, but.
That's okay, I'll allow it.
Yes, he has.
When was the first time you used an earpiece with Mr. Depp?
First time we used it was on a movie he was directing called The Brave. We were doing a scene with Marlon Brando, who wears an earpiece for receiving his dialogue.
Objection.
I'll allow it, that's fine, go ahead.
Marlon uses an earpiece for his dialogue, and it was a long shooting day, and we let Johnny, as the director, let Marlon go after we shot Marlon's section of the film, and then for Johnny's character to act against something other than just a blank nothing, we put Marlon's performance in an earpiece into Johnny so he could act up against Marlon's performance.
Did Mr. Depp ever use an earpiece for some other purpose other than listening to Mr. Brando's dialogue?
After that, we started using an earpiece all the time where Johnny would listen to music while acting. We would play all different kinds of music depending on the character he was playing. He and I would talk about it beforehand, and sometimes it'd be classical, sometimes it would be rock, sometimes it would be blues. It depended on the character.
To what extent, if any, did you and Mr. Depp use that process in other movies on which you worked together?
We used that on every movie.
Mr. Wyatt, on those occasions, in addition to feeding Mr. Depp music, did you ever read lines to him?
Yes.
Why did you read lines to Mr. Depp?
Johnny typically likes to go into makeup in the morning and write his own dialogue and rewrite his dialogue. So sometimes there's not enough time to always to remember the lines and learn them. So I would remind him in his ear sometimes while music was playing at the same time.
And Mr. Wyatt, in your long experience working with Mr. Depp on films, how would you describe his level of preparedness on the set?
He's absolutely prepared. He knows what he wants the character to be. He collaborates with the director on what his ideas are, but he always comes very prepared.
And Mr. Wyatt, during your long relationship with Mr. Depp, what, if any, opportunity have you had to observe his sense of humor?
Quite often.
How would you describe to the jury Mr. Depp's sense of humor?
He likes like a British humor. He's sometimes a little dark, maybe. He likes plays on words, that sort of thing.
Monty Python?
Monty Python. There's a show in England called The Fast Show, which he used to love watching.
Mr. Wyatt, what, if any, relationship do you have with Mr. Depp outside of your working relationship?
We're close. I used to, after a film, sometimes he'd call and I would go on vacation with he and his family.
On what occasions would you go on vacation with Mr. Depp and his family?
He would call after a film, and he would be going away with the kids and Vanessa, and he would say, "Hey, we're going to the island. Would you come with me?" and stuff. Or, "We're going to France. Would you come along?" And sure, why not?
Would you please give the jury Vanessa's full name?
Vanessa Paradis.
And would you please tell the jury who she is?
She is the mother of Johnny's two kids, Jack and Lily Rose.
And Mr. Wyatt, on how many occasions, if you can recall, did you accompany Mr. Depp, Ms. Paradis, and Johnny's two children on vacations?
Several times.
On those several occasions where you accompanied them on vacation, did you ever observe Mr. Depp and Vanessa interact with each other?
Sure, yes.
Would you please tell the jury what you observed?
They were a loving couple, and everything was fine. Yeah, it was a family.
Did you ever hear or see Mr. Depp yell or raise his voice at Vanessa Paradis, the mother of his children?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever, on any occasion, see Mr. Depp physically abuse Vanessa?
Never.
And I believe you testified, Mr. Wyatt, that Mr. Depp's and Ms. Paradis' children, Lily Rose and Jack, were there on those vacations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to observe Mr. Depp's interactions with his children?
Sure, yes.
Would you please describe for the jury very briefly Mr. Depp's interactions with his children, Jack and Lily Rose?
He was a very loving father. He used to do stuff with the kids all the time, going swimming at the island and teaching them scuba diving and, you know, just drawing, a lot of drawing, doing artwork.
Did he ever yell or raise his voice at his children?
Not that I recall. Nothing that stands out, no.
Mr. Wyatt, on what, if any, occasions have you seen Mr. Depp drink alcohol?
We drink alcohol quite often.
And on those occasions in which you had alcohol with Mr. Depp, how, if at all, did his behavior change?
I don't remember it changing at all. I don't remember him changing.
Mr. Depp used drugs.
I've seen him take pills. Don't know what they were. I wouldn't know what they were, but that's all.
Based on your observations, when you have seen him taking pills, how, if at all, did the taking of pills affect his behavior?
I didn't see any change in Johnny. I don't recall anything changing.
Mr. Wyatt, do you know the defendant in this case, Ms. Amber Heard?
Yes.
When did you first meet Ms. Heard?
On the set of Rum Diary.
On how many occasions, if at all, did you see Ms. Heard after that?
Several times.
Would you please describe for the jury very briefly your relationship with Ms. Heard after you saw her the first few times?
I mean, I don't really have a relationship with her. We didn't sit and talk. I didn't hang out with her or anything like that.
Did there come a time when you became aware that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were romantically involved?
Yes.
How often did you see Mr. Depp after he started the romantic relationship with Ms. Heard?
Oh, I don't recall. I didn't see him that often, but I don't recall how often, but I didn't see him that much.
How often were you together? Strike that. How often did you interact with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard when the two of them were together?
Just only occasionally did I see him. I mean, I would leave him alone, let him have his time with Amber. I wasn't into interfering.
And on those occasions where you interacted with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard as a couple, did you ever hear Mr. Depp yell at or raise his voice to Ms. Heard?
No.
On what occasions, if any, did he ever raise his hand to or otherwise abuse Ms. Heard?
I've never seen him be violent towards anybody.
And if we could, did there come switch gears here, did there come a time in May 2014 when you traveled with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard by private plane from Boston to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Who else was on that Boston plane flight?
It was Amber and Johnny, Stephen, Savannah, and Jerry Judge and myself.
And would you please tell the jury who is Stephen?
Stephen Duders is Johnny's assistant.
Who is Savannah?
Savannah was Amber's assistant.
And I think the jury has heard the name Jerry Judge, but if you could please explain to the jury again who Jerry Judge is.
Jerry Judge is Johnny's security.
Mr. Wyatt, why were you on that flight that night?
I don't know the exact circumstances of that flight. I didn't travel with the two of them that often. I was probably headed back to Los Angeles to see my daughter.
And before you got on the flight, how did you arrive at the airport that night?
We came in a car.
When you say you came in the car, with whom did you come in the car?
It was Jerry, Stephen, Nathan, Johnny, and myself.
And who is Nathan?
Nathan is Johnny's other assistant, Nathan Holmes.
What, if any, alcohol or drugs did you see Mr. Depp take while on the car ride to the airport?
On the car ride, I don't recall anything being taken. Johnny, I know, had called Jack during the car ride to talk to him, to tell him we were on our way. And we were listening to the World Cup that was going on at the time.
And if you could just remind the jury who Jack is?
Jack is Johnny's little boy.
When you and Mr. Depp and the security personnel arrived at the plane, who, if anyone, was there at the plane?
The plane had come from New York with Amber and Savannah already on it.
What, if anything, did you observe about Ms. Heard's behavior on that Boston flight?
Well, she was giving Johnny the cold shoulder, being quiet, and seemed pouty.
What, if any, conversation did you have with Ms. Heard on the flight?
At one point, I went up to her and said something to the effect of, he cares about you. And all of a sudden, she snapped and started yelling at me, "How dare you talk to me? Get away from me." So I went back to a seat and minded my own business.
When she said those things to you, would you describe the tone of her voice, if you remember it?
She was abruptly loud. It was a quiet plane. All of a sudden, it got very loud.
And I believe you testified you went back to your seat, or you moved. What happened next?
Johnny had said something to her like, "Don't talk to my friend that way," and I just stayed in my seat and finished the rest of the flight.
And after you went back to your seat, to what extent, if any, were you able to see Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
I was able to see them very clearly.
What, if any, violence or physical altercation did you observe between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard once you'd gone back to your seat?
I've never seen Johnny be violent towards anybody.
To what extent, if any, did you observe Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard hit, kick, or throw anything at each other on the plane?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Mr. Wyatt, was Mr. Depp consuming any alcohol on that flight?
Sure, yes.
Did he seem intoxicated?
Seem intoxicated? No, he seemed like Johnny. No, he seemed normal.
Did there come a time, Mr. Wyatt, when you learned that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were getting married to each other?
Yes.
How did you find out about that there would be a wedding?
I was at the Infinitum office, and Christy came to me and said, "Hey,"
I'm just asking, it's not for the proof, I'm just asking him how he found out about the wedding.
All right, what's the relevance of how?
May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
Mr. Wyatt, did you end up attending the wedding?
Yes, I did.
Where was that? Where did the wedding take place?
Well, there's two weddings, one at Betty Sue's house, Johnny's mom's house, and then another one on the island. The one on the island I did not attend.
What, if anything, did you observe at the Los Angeles ceremony that you attended at Betty Sue,
Betty
Mr.
Sue's
Depp's
house?
mother's house?
It was all very quick. I mean, we all found out about it at the last moment. There was a bit of confusion. Johnny had a friend from out of town, and she wasn't sure what was going on. Little Jack didn't understand what was going on.
I'll sustain as to other people. Go ahead.
What, if anything, did you observe about Ms. Heard's demeanor at the ceremony?
She was very happy-go-lucky. She was all dressed up. All of her friends were nicely dressed up and ready for a wedding.
Have you ever, in the course of your interactions with Ms. Heard, ever seen any marks, injuries, or bruises on her?
I have not, no.
During the decades that you have known Mr. Depp, to what extent, if any, are you aware of any woman other than Ms. Heard accusing him of abuse?
I'll allow it.
I've never seen Johnny abuse anybody, ever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wyatt. That's all I have right now.
Why don't we go ahead and take our break? All right, let's go ahead and take our morning break for 15 minutes. Do not say anything, do not talk to me about the case, and don't look up anything. If a juror needs to address something to me, please write it down and give it to the deputy, okay? All right, thank you. You're excused. 15 minutes. And Mr. Wyatt, since you're still in the middle of your testimony, you can't discuss the case or your testimony with the attorneys or with Mr. Depp at this time, okay? All right, thank you. Let's just come back. Let's make it 11:20, okay? We'll come back at 11:20? All right, thank you.
All right.